a second. Yep. All right, we guys are live. Thank you all for joining for this mock interview sessions with hiring managers. We do this already 3 years so far. And today we have Eugene Polonsky and George Andros. Eugene, he is an engineering manager at IMDb and Amazon company. And George, you probably saw him last Saturday. We did the mock interview. He's a director of QA, of engineering and QA. Previously worked at Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, you name it, George. Yeah, thank you all for participating. So for who is the first time, let me explain how it looks like and what you should expect. So this mock interview we do specifically anonymously to make sure that you feel safe to get the real feedback, right? What happened when you got rejected during the interview? Usually you will get a standard generic email. Thank you for applying, or thank you for your time, but we decided to move forward with the next candidate or whatever, right? Today, specifically, like if you have gone through the interview and haven't failed it, but was curious, like, why did I fail? What happened? So today is the day that when you can find the truth, right? So you will get the real feedback. As I like how George said, we'll be like friends during the beer, right? Like, we'll just tell you just for exactly like right up front. Yeah, so that's about it. If you want to participate in our mock interviews, as I mentioned, join to the Slack channel. We have their onboarding channel. Go through the instructions. It's pretty easy. So we have a few candidates already prepared for today. And also we'll have an announcement of our program. We'll let you know somewhere in the middle. Sounds good?
There's one more small thing I would add. Generally, interviews tend to be composed of two parts, right? There's technical interviews and behavioral interviews. Behavioral interviews are the ones with questions like, tell me about a time when you blah, 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 right? So technical interviews, there's a lot of information on the net, and there are really good sites like, you guys all know LeetCode and Algo Expert that can let you practice technical questions, give you instant feedback, give detailed run-throughs of the solutions, and so on. So we tend to not focus on those in these meetings. We tend to focus more on behavioral. And behavioral, also known as soft skills type questions, are ones that candidates very often undervalue, right? Under-prepare for. And those wind up being some of the most important questions that I ask as a hiring manager. So that's sort of what we tend to focus on. And that's what we want to make sure you guys come away with as strong an understanding as possible.
Totally. Totally. All right, let's get started. We'll start with candidate number 3. Let me put you to panelists. And I think
one moment.
Yeah, I already put it.
Hello, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, can you see me though?
We don't see you, and this is good.
All right, sorry, just give me a second, okay? I mean, I'm trying to adjust it a little bit.
Yeah, I would actually mention that if possible, being able to see you may be better, because there are a lot of nonverbal cues that are passed in these questions. For example, eye contact, looking away, that sort of thing that we would be able to comment on. That obviously we can't if we can't see you.
Got it.
It's up to you. Either way is fine.
I'm trying. Does it work now? No. Does it work now? All right, there we go. Sorry.
No worries. It would also be great to get maybe a first name. It doesn't have to be a real first name, but I just don't want to refer to you as candidate number 3 all the time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's fine. Hi, I'm candidate number 3, and I'm grateful that I got a chance to join this mock interview session. I truly appreciate it, and Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I should introduce myself. I mean, because I need to keep it anonymous. So
Sure. If there is a name that you would prefer that I call you, it doesn't have to be your real name. Just
yeah,
some name, so I don't keep saying candidate number 3.
yeah, sure. Just call me Hao.
Okay, Hao. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Well, welcome, Hao. Thank you so much for volunteering. I know it's scary going out in a group of people like this. The big advantage, though, is that the kind of fear that people typically feel when performing in public like this is the same fear you will feel when you're in an actual interview. So this is a great way to sort of practice under a similar sort of pressure. So thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, no problem.
Now, in terms of interview questions, so just to get an idea from you, what level of role are you looking for? Like, is it a junior, mid, senior?
I'm looking for something between junior and mid-level. Because honestly, I am not quite sure, about the definition. I mean, different companies have different definition of their like software engineer level, right?
Sure.
So we don't have a unified standard that makes it a little bit hard. But I was searching a little bit online, and I think I am more looking for like something around mid-level junior. I don't see myself looking for some positions around senior level. I don't think I'm there yet. But yeah.
Sure. Sounds good. The reason I asked this question is I typically structure my hiring interviews. I've drunk the Amazon Kool-Aid specifically around their leadership principles, and I structure my behavioral questions around specific leadership principles. Now, for junior to mid-level candidates, the 2 leadership principles that are the most important to show are going to be deliver results and dive deep. Right, so those 2 are super important to show. And so yeah, my behavioral questions are going to center around those 2. The way this will work is I will ask you a question, and if you have a good example that you can lean on, that you can talk through, try to follow the STAR story format. We've spoken in the past quite extensively about what that format is and how to do it. But if you're not familiar, happy to give a really brief primer. But anyway, try to follow that as much as you can. And at the end of your response, George and I will jump in and kind of give feedback on what we thought, areas that were not as strong potentially, or areas that were really shown, etc. Does that make sense? All right. So let's start with deliver results. And not all hiring managers will specifically tell you the leadership principle they're asking about, but you can kind of tell from the question itself. So the question is going to be, can you tell me about a time when you not only met a goal, but considerably exceeded expectations?
Yeah, sure. Not only met a goal, but exceed the results. Yeah, I think it was a long while ago already. So I'll take it as a let me think a bit. I'll use the sprint that we had in the team as an example, maybe. So previously, well, it was a long while ago. So there was a time where our team was having trouble on planning, like real trouble. By that I mean, the team got like I forgot the name, like burn down chart, something like that. There's a chart showing on Jira, basically saying how many points you achieved, kind of thing. And our team was not looking good. So that by that time we were like, what should we do then? The planning was never accurate. What are we gonna do? So instead, what I did was, just I was trying to persuade the team, don't do it too aggressively, because like from leadership standpoint, if we undercommit and eventually over deliver, they will be happy, and and mentally, members will have a less kind of stress, because I'll be honest, I'm not a person that can, I feel panic all the time. So I think put in a smaller goal and try to achieve it in the X amount of time would be an easier task. An example would be, so we were trying to not to plan so aggressively, right? So an example would be saying, at that time I was on a QA position, so I was working on some sort of a automation test, and I made a commitment, well, basically saying, hey, you know, we need to reduce the flaky tests that we have in our code. And I think I put I put a low number there. I was just joining and started working, but I put a low number there. I think I was putting like 3 to 5%. And so, you know, that was like a flexible range. I put it 3 to 5 because I think more than 5 that would be too much, but 3 seems achievable. So I said, you know, probably fix you know, all the flaky tests. Let's, you know, fix them between 3 to 5%. And eventually I think I got like 7. So, you know, over deliver. But you know, like I was, but from my perspective, you know, just my thing. I put it like, you know, I set the goal to 3 to 5% so that mentally I don't feel stressed, because I think that it's still doable. And eventually, you know, I can bring it to over deliver, and everyone's gonna be happy about it. And possibly, you know, I can get more time to pick up some other tasks in the sprint. But does this make sense? Yeah, just a little example here.
Okay. So I have some thoughts sort of from top level, and then I'll kind of drill down a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing I will mention, that very often candidates, when they're feeling a degree of nervousness in an interview, whether it be virtual or in person, begin to speak faster.
Right.
And when that happens, the clarity of the communication, so the ability to understand what they're saying, decreases rapidly.
Got
right? So there were certain times when you were kind of skipping through the words that I was having a little bit of trouble following. Not anything huge, but this is something like, there are really good apps, by the way. Just Google them for monitoring your speech as you're speaking in a VC setting, and popping up like saying something like speak slower or use less filler words, etc., etc. It's AI-enabled apps. I forget the exact name now, but that could be worth using to practice the way you communicate in answering these questions. So that's just a general sort of language comprehension pointer. The other thing that I would mention is, so a story in the, so if I were to basically sum up what I heard from my own perspective, what I hear is, well, Hao is super cautious with setting goals because he doesn't want to stretch or doesn't want to have to stretch and sort of get stressed. And so he sets goals super conservatively and then marginally exceeds them. So that is not a strong story for me as a hiring manager, right? Because the story, like in answer to this question, the story that I want to hear is like, hey, I engaged, we set these like aggressive goals, and I worked my butt off to not only meet them, but look at all the other stuff that I did to exceed those goals, right? Because what I'm looking for in this question, remember, the leadership principle is deliver results, right? And so what I'm looking for when I'm trying to ask this question is somebody who just completely blows away on the deliver results leadership, right? Leadership principle. So there is a way to tell exactly the same story as you told, just in a way that spins it a little bit more positively. For example, you could say something along the lines of, you know, we as a team had a history of not meeting our sprint deliverables. I diagnosed this as one of the issues that I diagnosed as a root cause is the fact that we were making unrealistic expectations, and then of course we were failing to meet them. So I had a conversation with my team about how can we get to set better expectations and more realistic expectations. And as part of that, I wanted to lead by example. So what I did was I took on the problem of flaky tests, which is a problem that nobody else wanted to touch, right? It's a problem that, you know, no developer typically wants to touch flaky tests. Like everybody can identify with that, right? So I took on the problem of solving this for the team. And I knew this was one of the things that was really holding our team back from being able to meet our deliverables. And so I took this on. I did not want to repeat the mistake of setting unrealistic expectations. So in my analysis, I figured out that going for about, you know, whatever it is, 3%, 4% overall reduction would probably be the most realistic goal we can set as step one, and then kind of build from there, right? And so I dug in, I worked extra hard, and I managed to not only meet this goal, but I managed to exceed this goal by almost half, right? So I doubled the amount of flakiness reduction that was expected. And as a result, right, so the R part of the store of the star format, as a result, the team was able to execute far more efficiently from that point on, right? Like, or our cycle, like our burn down velocity increased by 10%, 15%, whatever it is, right? If you don't know those numbers, you can sort of guesstimate, like, don't make things up. Like, our team started working twice as efficiently. Like, that's not gonna apply, right? But you can kind of take an educated guess, right? Because you must have seen the result of your actions, of your actions, right? Of the flakiness reduction. You must have seen how pipeline breakages became less common, right? Tickets or commits went through a little bit faster, which has an effect on the team velocity, right? So that's the result that you want to talk about, right? So I decreased flaky tests, that's great, but that's not the result in itself. The result is our team went X% faster, or time from commit to deploy decreased by 20%, or whatever that might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just one more question on this. So when you said, if I don't know exactly the number, what should I do again? Just do a guess?
I would guesstimate, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would guesstimate. Like, a little bit of spin in these stories is okay, right? Don't make wild, outrageous claims, because like they will just not ring true. But as a hiring manager, like, I don't know your system. I don't know exactly what the impact of your change was. I know what number is believable.
Yeah.
Like 10%, 15%, maybe even 20% is believable to me. Right? So give me that number.
All right.
Right?
Thank you.
So that's one thing. The second thing, really quick. So this is, at this point, we are on the level of minor details. You mentioned at the very beginning when you started the story, this was a long while ago. Typically, when you're answering behavioral questions, you want to answer from recent experience, right? So in the past, like 1 year, maybe 2 years, if you really don't have a story, and that can very often happen, that answer the specific question asked, and it did happen a long while ago, just don't mention that it happened a long while ago.
Got it.
Right? I was on a team. We were working on this problem. Like, you don't need to tell me that, like, oh, this was sometime long in the past, right? That doesn't help me as a hiring manager, and it doesn't help you as an interviewee.
Thank you.
The thing I really liked in your response, which I think you could really stress. Sorry, George, one last point, and then I'll shut up. When you were talking about under commit and over deliver, right? And you were sort of the voice of reason on the team. You were trying to get them to meet realistic goals. That's great, right? So I would expand that. I would say we had a meeting with the team, whatever it is. Maybe you organized the meeting or whatever. But I went into this meeting and I really talked to them about the necessity of under committing and over delivering, how it would make the team look better, etc. So expand that a little bit. This is a mature response, right? It's something you would expect from a mid-level or senior level engineer. So I would expand on that part. Okay, and now I'll shut up.
All right. No, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just add a couple points. Eugene gave you really good feedback. I would just, whole stock, implement everything he told you. Try not to repeat what he said. I just wanted to add a couple points. I'm also not as nice as Eugene, so I kind of talk to you like a friend, and I'm going to tell you straight up, that wasn't a good answer for a lot of the reasons Eugene said. But you basically said, I overestimated my task so I can finish under. It wasn't an example of exceeding expectations. Unless this example has a lot more to it, like, tell me how you improved the estimations for the entire team, right? And what was that improvement? How'd you do it, right? You started by saying the team had trouble, and you ended by saying, I just changed my estimation for myself. So, like, you're not telling me how awesome you are, right? That's what I want to know. Also, Yeah, I had a lot of the same points Eugene said. I won't repeat them, but I'd also say watch your words, how you say certain things, because like you started by saying it was a long time ago, it was a while ago, but you didn't say how long ago. So to me, this makes it seem like it's been a really long time since you exceeded expectations. I know that's not the case. So that was just not necessary to mention that at all. Other things in the beginning, it sounded like you were a little nervous, but you were saying very vague terms. Like, I forgot the name of the chart. The team was not working. Yeah, and I don't do it too aggressively. Like all these things, I don't know what they mean, right? What's too aggressive? Like, if you, I mean, first it comes with practice, right? Like being able to just say this example over and over again in a way that's like very precise and kind of your story well helps. If you don't, if it's something you're saying for the first time, it's totally okay. Kind of like you did. You started by repeating the question. I thought that was great because it gave you a little bit of time to think through it. It gave Eugene a time to maybe clarify the question. If you're just repeating his words, but maybe he, like when he listens to the question he asked, maybe he's going to add more. It's okay to ask a clarifying question. You could do that by yourself a little bit of time. I take notes, so sometimes I'll just write words to help me kind of organize my thoughts and then speak. So, and also, you didn't come off sounding great in this answer. Also, I don't like hearing that we should underpromise and overdeliver. That sounds like you're going to game the system. Like if I hire you, you're going to just find ways to fudge your numbers and make yourself look good. Remember, in an interview, you need to impress. So even if something's going to sound neutral, I wouldn't go with that. You know, tell me how awesome you are. If there's something that is part of the story but isn't great, just leave it out. You don't need to break yourself into jail.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the under promise and over deliver is an interesting point. I do remember, at least in Microsoft, that was one of the, like, it's not that they wanted people to like madly deflate their deliverables just so that they can then exceed them. Like it wasn't that, but there was a focus on not over promising, right? Because at the end of the day, like that hits the customer, right? If you over promise and under deliver, you hit the customer. So
it's a matter of how you say it. Yeah, it's a matter of how you say it. One is like a very mature way of looking at it and saying, I don't want to overpromise, right? So I'm going to give a realistic estimate, right? That's great. But saying I'm just going to know my estimate, but I'm going to underpromise, I don't like that as much. It just says I'm going to try not to work too hard and still meet expectations or something. So I think there's a better way of phrasing it.
That's fair.
Thank you for being brave as the first person.
No, it's all good.
And one more thing, I was looking at your anonymous resume. It doesn't have much about the impact of the work that you did, especially under work experience. I don't see the outcomes that you produced. So it seems like a very generic type resume of things you worked on. I'd love to see metrics, outcomes, you know, what your work did to improve the company, the team, the product.
I do have a question on that. So again, you know, if I don't know the number, I just do a guess.
Yeah, metrics are great. Don't, like Eugene said, make sure it's believable, right? If it's true but completely unbelievable, you know, so be cautious with that, but definitely put in numbers. Yeah, guessing is fine, as long as it's accurate and believable.
Got it.
And be ready to be challenged on that too, right? So if you put in a metric, I could ask, how do you know that the work you did produced a 20% reduction, right? So be ready with an answer to that. Like saying that I guessed is not the answer. The answer should be, we took a look at the sprint burn down chart and we looked at the slope of its velocity. That could be an answer. If we're talking about commit to deploy time, that's typically like all CI/CD systems track that. So that could be an answer, right? So the point is like, you probably don't want to tell a hiring manager you're guessing, Worst case scenario, you can say I talked to my teammates and this is kind of the number that we came up with together because we had no direct way of measuring.
Good.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Candidate number 3. Kudos for being first. Awesome. And I wish you good luck with a job search. I know it's not that easy.
Yep.
And please join us to the next mock interviews. Prepare based on your feedback that you got today.
Sure.
Welcome to join to our next mock interviews. And I would love to see your progress. All right.
Yeah, sure. Thank you all.
Thank you
Truly
so much.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right.
All right. Putting back to attendees. Before we move forward with the candidate, with the second candidate, we're gonna do a quick announcement of our program that we prepared with several hiring managers. And Eugene, you want to take it over? You want to share?
Yes. Yep. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, this is sort of something that we've been working on over the last couple of months as we have been talking to all of you and as we have been doing private coaching. The consistent message that we have been hearing is like, hey, you know, the interview prep and the behavioral prep is great. It's wonderful, but I can't even get interviews, right? Like in this current job market with the amount of layoffs coming in, it's just difficult to even get to a point where there are interviews. And so we've been thinking, what can we do to address this problem? And, you know, this is not really the only problem. There are several, right? So they're sort of related all in a cloud. So the first problem is getting hiring managers and getting recruiters to not ghost you, right? Like we've all had the experience where we're sending our resumes in to multiple jobs. We never hear anything back. Best case scenario, we hear a standardized thank you, but no thank you, right? And that is typically coming from the candidate tracking system. So it's not even getting to a human. So the question is, you know, how do you get interviews? Second, if you don't have, especially for earlier career candidates, if you don't have a huge amount of experience, what do you put on your resume, right? How do you make your resume stand out from other candidates, especially when so many mid and senior level candidates have been laid off recently and are also looking for jobs, right? So how do you even get your foot in the door? And the third thing is, you know, I have managed personally bootcamp graduates, and I found a lot of diamonds in the rough there. But we have been talking to a few of them as part of our outreach, and we find that, you know, bootcamps will often, you know, they'll take 10K or 15K. They will promise you riches and they'll promise you a high-paying IT job, and then you graduate and nothing happens. You send your resume and silence, nothing happens. So we wanted to kind of try to design a program that would address those pain points. And so the basic idea of our program, or basically what we're trying to do, is put candidates into a program where we'll work with them intensively. And I'll tell you guys a little bit more information about this at the next slide. And at the end of the program, for those who graduate, we will guarantee interviews at our partner companies. And we're actively working with companies because you have to understand from the company perspective, this is incredibly painful as well, right? Because what happens is every time, like when I open a rec for IMDb, I get like 2,000-3,000 resumes within a matter of a few days, right? It's that bad. And how do I want to spend weeks and weeks shifting through those resumes and trying to find the diamonds in the rough? Probably not. We've talked to a bunch of startups and they're telling us that their average hire rate is about 2%. In other words, they have to talk to 50 people before they found one that they actually want to hire, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to go to these partner companies and we tell them, look, we will get you a pipeline of high quality vetted candidates, right? And all you need to do is guarantee interviews for them. Like that's all we ask. And we are signing up companies that agree to this because for them, it's a huge cost savings, right? It costs a lot to find the right candidate, right? And this sort of shortcuts that process for them. So, you know, in our program, as I mentioned, those who graduate will get guaranteed interviews. They will receive personalized coaching from myself, from George, from other members of our team who are all senior level execs from main companies, right? We will not accept everybody. There is a certain minimum degree of competence that is needed to succeed in our program. And I can talk about that a little bit later. And finally, we will work on a real world project, right? So we will actually pick a project that is deployable and that is useful, and we will develop it just as if we were a part of a real company, right? So we will manage teams of candidates in exactly the same way that we would manage them if they were actually reporting to us in our respective companies. So essentially, the way this program works is we will work through a project from scratch to deployment in a period of time. We will practice all of the software development lifecycles principles, right? So we will do design, we will do user story generation, we will do thin slicing, we will do testing, obviously, we will work with Git, we will do code reviews, and throughout this whole process, we teach you guys how to do this more effectively, right? So we pass on the knowledge that we have gained from our experiences and help you do this in a more effective way. You will be collaborating with fellow PM, Dev, and QA on this real project, right? You will receive daily coaching and weekly feedback. So basically, we will have meetings every day. We will have one-on-one meeting a week, but we will also have group meetings with the team every day. And you will be receiving coaching both in person and offline during this time. And then as we are coaching and as we are trying to teach you these new skills, we are also performing an evaluation on how you're doing, right? And we are basically looking at 4 main criteria. Ownership, right? So the degree to which you go above and beyond to own a business problem and not just execute tasks. Competence, that's the basic skill set needed for your role. Collaboration, how effectively do you collaborate with other developers, other QA, PM on the team? And finally, attitude, right? Like, are you an enzyme for the team? In other words, do you lift the team up, or is there negativity? So those are the kind of things that we are evaluating, and we are giving you feedback on those attributes all the way throughout. So as I mentioned, what you get in this program is access to our network of companies that have signed up to work with us. For those companies, those who graduate the program get guaranteed interviews, right? We will also, every week, we will do a group class on interview preparation. The format will be very similar to what we do in these webinars, but it will be a little bit more intensive, right? We will be working with you in smaller groups, and you'll get a little bit more feedback. And finally, on Hire, we will provide weekly career coaching for the first 90 days on the job. Because ultimately, our motivation and what we need to accomplish is make sure that anybody who goes through our program and who graduates succeeds on their job, right? That the companies that they're going into are as happy as possible about their performance. And so that's what this 90-day career mentoring is about, right? Like it is to help shorten your ramp time. It is to help you stand out from other employees in your new team, right? It is to help you succeed. So as far as what you put in, so we will be working with you over a 6-week period of time, right? And during those 6 weeks, there will be enough work to account for approximately 20 hours a week, right? There will be folks who are more efficient, who will need to put in less time and still, do everything. There will be folks who will be a little bit less efficient and who might need a little bit extra time. And that's fine, like that always happens. But essentially, like that's about the average that we're aiming for. Growth mindset, right? So you need to come into this program prepared to learn, super important, and prepared to find out new things, prepared to grow. There will be skills and technologies that you're unfamiliar with. That's totally fine, right? Microsoft, for example, makes a huge distinction between skills and competencies, right? Skills being languages are things you, like, for example, languages are things you can pick up in like a week or two if you're motivated. Right? Competencies such as dealing with ambiguity, such as communication, written communication, things like that, take years to pick up. So we will accelerate that process because we're working with you on those competencies. But ultimately, it is up to you around how much of that growth mindset you put in. And then finally, we charge a $1,000 flat fee for the program, for the duration of the program. Honestly, the biggest reason we do this is we want to make sure that your teammates who are in this program with you are serious about the program, right? What we don't want to have happen is we form these teams and then people just start dropping off. And so this is basically a motivator to keep people in the program. That's sort of the major reason. But in terms of the costs, we also offer a referral program. And the referral program is very simple. For every accepted candidate you bring into the program, you get 250 off. So what that essentially means is if you enroll 4 other candidates into our program, your own tuition is free. This discount also applies while you're in the program. So in other words, let's say you pay, you start the 6 weeks and you bring in 4 candidates. For every candidate you bring in, we will refund 250 out of your payment. In terms of minimum requirements to get into the program, right? So you need to have a demonstrable coding ability in a modern language, right? It doesn't matter what language. It can be any one of these. It could also be others, potentially, right? These are just the ones that kind of struck us. But as long as it's a modern language, like assembly probably is not going to cut it. But as long as it's a modern language and you can show that you can code, that's fine, right? Basic understanding of system design principles, right? Like I'm talking about all the way down from OOP, right? Object-oriented principles and how to structure your classes more or less effectively, all the way up to component design and overall system design. You don't have to be an expert in these things, but you do have to have some fundamental understanding, right? Because our objective is not to teach you how to be a software engineer from scratch. That is not possible in 6 weeks. And anybody who says otherwise is lying, right? Our objective is to take folks who are coders, right? Who may have graduated college, may have graduated a boot camp, so they understand how to code basically and you know how to implement their thoughts in a language, but they're not software engineers yet. So our motto from that extent is kind of we turn coders into software engineers. And you know, basic knowledge of GitHub, obviously, and then a very similar set of skills for SDAT and QE roles. So in terms of our application process, so you can register today. There is a form that you would fill out on intellihire.tech on that website. So you can fill out your interest there. We will contact you. We will set up a meeting. And in this meeting, like 30 minutes, we will talk about kind of what you're looking for. We'll talk about your skill set. It will not yet be an assessment. And if we see that after that 30 minutes that this program seems like a good fit, we will send you an offline assessment to do, basically coding assessment. And assuming that you get through that coding assessment, at that point you're admitted, you will be able to, so our first cohort starts in mid-August is what we're aiming for. So you will start at that point, or if we find enough engineers starting sooner, we can even start sooner. After mid-August, basically we will have new engineers starting every week, right? So as soon as you get through, you can start the next Monday. Cool. So let me open the floor for questions and we can talk through that.
Yeah, we have a question from Rahit Vyas. I'll give you a mic to talk if you want to ask a question. But Rahit, you're able to talk if you have a question. There is a question if there is a payment options. Well, not at this moment, but yeah, apply. We'll contact you and we can discuss this as well. But in general, yeah, we can be flexible, but for right now, we haven't prepared any payment options.
Yeah, this is certainly up for discussion. Like, let's have the meeting, let's discuss your specific needs, and I'm sure we can work something out.
Yeah. All right. I think Rahid probably pushed the button accidentally. Back. Anyway, guys, yeah. You just apply to our program if again, like if you are struggling with getting the interviews or getting a job or actually getting the experience even, right? This is the program that we designed. Yeah, thank you very much. Let's move forward with a candidate. The second candidate will be, let me move forward to panelists. Shai. Oh yeah, and by the way, we forgot to ask the previous candidate to share the resume, so to have the context of the position. I know, Eugene, that you are not that much interested in, in the resume, but to give a context for people, the resume was already redacted. All right, Akshay, hello, can you hear us?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
candidate.
I can hear you.
All right, awesome.
Akshay, do I pronounce your name correctly? Is it Akshay?
Yeah, that's correct.
Akshay, awesome.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Before
Thank you so
we're
much.
gonna start, can I ask you, Akshay, to share your resume with us, like, so people will
Oh, yeah.
see. I mean,
I think
share the resume through the share screen. Can you?
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Eugene, sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to say thank you for volunteering.
Thanks for your time. Is it visible now?
It is visible.
Mhm. Okay, so it sounds like you are a new college graduate. Is that correct?
Yes.
You
Yes.
have
Correct.
master of science in computer science. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. And you're looking for essentially an entry-level position in tech.
Software engineer, yeah, related to computer science positions.
Okay, great. Let's see. Well, let me pick a good question then. Let's actually go for a dive deep question. Because those especially for college grads, especially with a master's degree, like there will have been opportunity for you to dive deep. So can you tell me about a problem that you had to solve that required in-depth thought and analysis? How did
Yeah.
you know you were focusing on the right things?
The one problem that I solved is regarding this enterprise project, where I worked as a quality software for a GM project through my college enterprise. It was related to the web scraping. We used a beautiful soup of the Python slide.
I'm sorry. Actually, sorry, one second. Your microphone seems to be cutting out, so I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. I don't know if other folks are experiencing the same.
Same here.
Just a second.
Okay.
By the way, just a hint for everyone, like the best microphone, if you have Mac, it's better use the internal Mac microphone versus to earbuds or even like this intercom thing. So
Yeah.
hint,
Am I audible now?
much better.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. The issue was related to the web scraping where we want to extract the data from the GM inventory. We have it's like getting the data for the car images, the prices, and the car capacity, everything we have to extract. I mean, our end goal is to develop a website for a GM for the car comparison. So previously our team used a beautiful soup where it consumed a lot of time and there were multiple errors. Then I went on my own self research where it took me 2 days to look on what exactly is happening, where we have to manually work on everything with the beautiful soup library. So I just made my self research with my professor and as well. Mm, uh, we just changed our using from beautiful soup to the selenium. It's another Python library where with the selenium we can able to extract the data just within a matter of minutes, and it worked more efficiently than the previous one. Within a week we extracted a lot of information where that impressed the GM professionals as well, where we had bi-weekly meetings and sometimes weekly meetings with the GM to let them know the updates. So they said it's a good work with the Selenium. So we just continued with that Selenium.
That makes sense. So how did you know that the bottleneck was Beautiful Soup?
Oh, it's just a web scraping we just used directly.
No, I mean, how did you know that that was the problem? You
Oh,
used Beautiful
yeah.
Soup rather than something else.
While extracting the data, we needed some tool to do that. I mean, there are many different tools to extract the data from the website. So they just directly used a Beautiful Soup library by importing from the Python.
Mhm.
So later, I just looked at the scripts, how they are structuring, like within a main GM inventory data for every individual curve, the Beautiful Soup will take extra length of coding, and we have to do that manually by navigating to the different websites. We have to copy paste the different links every time to get the data for each car. Whereas with the Selenium, it's not like that. We just make it, and we can make a chain link for the different individual cars.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, I guess getting a little bit more technical, like what was the exact difference between what Beautiful Soup was providing and the kind of challenges that you were encountering with using it
Oh, yeah.
versus how Selenium. And this, by the way, in the real interview, this could be a time when like you draw a quick architecture diagram and go a little bit more in depth onto the actual problem.
Yeah, I got it now. So with the Beautiful Soup, there won't be any virtual environment separately for extracting the data. Even for the images or for the data, we just need to directly depend upon the CSS selectors or the CSS styles where the data has been extracted, or we have to use the links. Whereas with the Selenium, we just created a separate virtual environment for the Selenium, and with the Selenium uses a Chrome driver where the Beautiful Soup doesn't use this Chrome driver. This Chrome driver loads the website separately just for the Selenium, which means it opens a separate Google Chrome just for the sake of project. And within the project, every time we just used a full export. The full export is like a address of the image or address of the data. Every minute detail is having a full export where that full export leads to the data. So we just use that full export within the Selenium to extract it.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so I can give you a little bit of feedback.
Okay.
So again, thank you for responding and for being brave to respond in this group.
I mean, no, thanks for your time.
Oh, of course, it's our pleasure. So first, remember that a response to these kind of questions really should follow the STAR format.
Okay.
Right? And the STAR format is situation, task, action, result. Right? So you want to structure your story in that manner, in situation, task, action, result. So when we talk about situation, you did talk about it, but you talked about it a little bit later, right? So the situation is you needed to develop a website for GM to do car comparisons, right? So that's the situation, right? Then task is what did you specifically need to do on this problem? Like who was involved? Like was it just you working by yourself? Was it you and your professor? Was it you and other students? So you need to explain that a little bit more clearly, right? Like, so either like I was the main implementer of this website, I was tasked with making it work, or I was part of a team and my responsibility was implementing the scraping algorithm, right? Or whatever it is, but you need to make that super clear.
Yep, makes sense.
So that's all great. Next, if you're going to, and for dive deep problems, talking about specific technology and talking about specific trade-offs is actually super important, right? But remember, my follow-up question when I first asked it was, how did you know you were focusing on the right outcomes or on the right things, right? And in the initial iteration of your answer, before I started asking the clarifying questions, you didn't quite get to that, right? So what I'm looking for when we're talking about a response like that is to say, we found that the implementation using Beautiful Soup was way too slow. It was processing cars at the rate of 1 car every 5 minutes or whatever it is, right? And at that rate, we would be sitting there for another 3 years before the website finished all of its scraping. So we needed to find a faster solution. I dug in. We didn't know exactly what the issue was, right? Why it was taking so long. So I dug in and profiled the implementation, and I found that the majority of time was being spent in the Beautiful Soup calls, right? So I went online and I did some deep dives to figure out why Beautiful Soup was being so slow, and I discovered that that was because it was creating virtual environments for every call, or whatever the actual technical issue was, right? Which was super memory inefficient and caused an extra load on the CPU, whatever, right? So once I discovered that root cause, right, and this is the action part of your story, right? So you're in the A. The action part should take the vast majority of your overall story. So you would say, once I discovered that Beautiful Soup was the root cause, I decided to start looking for alternatives. You could actually first say I started looking for, were there ways to optimize our usage of Beautiful Soup? Right? Because ideally what I want to hear is you encounter a problem and you find a quick and easy way to fix it. I don't want to hear you encounter a problem and you decide to blow up the whole thing and start from scratch, right? That's that's not great, right? So what you want to say is, before you decided to blow up the whole thing and start from scratch, essentially, you did a bunch of research to see, can I optimize the Beautiful Soup calls? Can I make it more efficient? You discovered, no, you cannot because of these inherent limitations. So then you went to look for alternatives, right? And a promising alternative you discovered was Selenium. The reason Selenium is a promising alternative is it only works with a single dedicated instance of Chrome, right? It does not create virtual environments for every call, so it was orders of magnitude faster, right?
Yeah,
and then
your explanation makes more clear.
Yeah, see, so that's kind of how you want to structure that story, right? So the story should follow sort of a logical chain of events, right? Okay. And the logical chain of events is, you have a problem, you need to make this website. You make an implementation. The implementation is too slow. Okay, how can we make it faster? Well, this fast approach doesn't work, like optimization. Okay, so what else can we do? We're going to go after Selenium, right? Why? Because this, and this. Right? You implement Selenium. You found, oh, hey, that's great, right? Selenium is actually way, way faster. Now, instead of processing cars at 1 car every 5 minutes, we're processing 500 cars every 5 seconds. So you implement that solution, you make it all work. Now your result is, you go to GM, you present the solution to GM execs, and you get huge positive praise, a lot of feedback, maybe ideally something like the solution is adopted by GM, or some sort of tangible result. Praise is great, executives are pleased, they like it, that's great, but that's not a measurable result. So if you can have a measurable result along the lines of, this solution was adopted by GM, or I don't know, something else along those lines, right? That's much more impactful.
Now that's clear to me.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I have I just have a small question. Can I ask you? It's just related to the general application thing. In a few months ago, I just applied for a entry-level position at Amazon. Under the application status, it changed from an application submitted to the under consideration. So does that mean a good thing? Or, I mean, it was more than a month, I think. I didn't hear any call regarding that.
Yeah. So most likely what that means is a recruiter has begun processing it, meaning I don't know for certain, I should say, because I don't work in the recruiting department. My understanding of how this works is, the recruiter is looking at the resume and is seeing, is there a potential match for a team, or different teams, etc. So next step, maybe they will reach out, and you'll have a conversation, or it may be that they'll find, no, there is actually no direct match, at which point they'll send you a thank you letter. Okay. So it's just the next step in the line. I don't know, George, you're ex-Amazon as well. Maybe a little bit more about
No,
it.
it's really frustrating because that status could be there for a really long time until it changed to, job is gone.
Okay.
So I wouldn't read too much into it. Continue applying to as many places as you can. The market's really tough right now. You're not the only one to have this story. So keep applying, work on your skills, attend things like this. It's tough.
I would also say join our program. You're sort of exactly the persona of candidate that we're looking for.
Oh, when I looked at your presentation, that was the thing in my mind. I should have to join it.
Yeah, we can certainly have a call and discuss, right? Like at the end of the day, to be very clear, our goal is not to create a revenue stream from candidates, right? Like that's not what we're in the business for. And a big reason we started this is we look at all those boot camps that promise all this stuff and don't deliver. And as engineers and as engineering managers, frankly, that just pisses us off, right? We don't want candidates to be suffering because we've all been there. We've all been early stage career and trying to get foot in the door. So we want to help.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you I think you're a great candidate because you have a master's. By the way you answered the question, like Eugene had to pull some information from you, but you know your stuff, right? And so I think you have the competence and a lot of the skills, but not too much experience, right? And that's exactly the gap we're trying to fill, right? You don't need a boot camp. You already have masters. What you want is to be able to continue to demonstrate your ability with like proven projects and kind of have that referral and backing of someone in the industry to be able to say, yeah, here's what I did, here's proof of it, here's link to GitHub and all this, and then be able to really answer well in interviews once you get the interviews. If I could just take a second and give you some additional feedback, I think Eugene covered pretty much everything really, really well. I would just want to highlight that when you answer, do the STAR method and give those details up front. Don't wait for the interviewer to ask you more questions, because I think in the end, what emerged was a very impressive, more detailed story than what you initially gave. It was very, very simple at first. It was like, I Googled something and found something better, right? So give those details. It's your chance to impress, and so don't be shy. Have that story well thought out, written. Cool. Just a couple other things. Test and confirm your virtual setup first. Your mic wasn't working very well at first. These are things that just take away from the interview experience, right? So be ready. If you don't have to, buy a great mic or anything. It's just be ready with your current setup. And I know this isn't a real interview, but I would, your camera looks good. Like you're smiling. That's really, really great. Like you have a good presence on camera. You weren't speaking too fast. So your delivery is good. You just need to polish what you're saying a little bit more. But yeah, I think everything else looked good.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just one more question. During some questions, is it okay to mention some non-academic things as well, like student organizations, if I don't get an idea on that particular question related to the academic stuff?
I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry.
I mean, there are some questions like situation-based questions. So in that particular time, if I don't get what to say on my academic stuff, is it okay to mention like I did this in student organization clubs? Is that okay to mention those things?
It is, but it does, and this is my personal perspective. So George, maybe you disagree, but it does have to be related to the job in some way. Okay. In other words, if I ask you about, tell me about a problem you had to solve that required thought and analysis, and you tell me about like the boats leaking at the rowing club, and you had to figure out why they were leaking, that doesn't work. Right? It has to be something technical. I will say one other hint though on this is there is a reason for why I mention leadership principles when I'm asking these questions. What I'm trying to kind of encourage you guys to think about is mapping the questions back to the leadership principle being examined. Because what may very well happen, like for example, on Amazon, there are 5 to 6 questions for every leadership principles. And we literally have a Word doc that lists those questions, right? And so interviewers will choose one of the questions from this Word doc and they will ask it. What may happen is the situation that is being asked in that specific question is like you haven't encountered it before. But you may have encountered a situation that also applies to the same leadership principle, right? And so a very feasible response in that situation is to say, well, you know, I haven't had a situation like that, but I have had a situation where I da 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 da, right? Do you want me to tell you about that? Right? As long as it's applicable to the same leadership principle, that's fine.
Okay.
Right? Like most of the time, the hiring manager, I mean, I can't guarantee it, but most of the time, the hiring manager will say, sure, I'd love to hear about that. Because what hiring managers are testing for, or interviewers, is the leadership principles. The question is just a way to get there.
Okay. Now it's clear.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's
you.
move. Let's move forward with the next candidate. We actually have 2 more candidates who wanted to go. I'm not sure if we can be able to process. But candidate number 2. Hello. Oh, hold on. It's not candidate number 2. Give me a sec. Should have. Hey, James. Hello.
Hello. Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, James.
All right. Awesome. We can hear you. Could you please do the same thing? Share your resume that you shared with us in the Slack channel. Just
Sure.
share your screen with your resume to give a context, like what are you looking for?
Oh, okay. 1 second here. Let me just kind of close out a bunch of different windows and stuff. Right. Grab the resume here. Wait, maybe I should just go to the Slack and grab it from there.
Whatever it's easier for you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh. Why not? Oh, whoops. The open system settings. I don't tend to use Slack too much, but
Don't worry. Don't worry.
yeah.
Let me do this. I'll share my window with your resume.
Okay.
All right. Give me a sec. Downloading. Download it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let me share my screen right now. Are you able to see?
Yeah, I can
Is
see
it the
it.
correct one? Great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Eugene.
Okay, so it looks like you have actually what, around 8 years of experience? Is that
Yeah,
right?
about 7 years experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
mm.
So what is the level of role that you're looking for?
I was looking for a senior level position. I've had senior positions at, okay, this is actually a modified, slightly old version, but at Bloomberg and RCG, I was a senior engineer. At Zipari, I was also a senior engineer. It was like more so a full stack role. So I'm kind of looking to enter into that role again. I guess I wouldn't mind a mid-level role, but I don't think there's many of those available currently. Yeah, so generally a senior position would be good.
Sounds great. So again, going back to our conversation about leadership principles and kind of how they evolve over roles, over seniority. So while deliver results and dive deep are super important at like junior and mid-level, when you get to senior, this changes a little bit. So one of the leadership principles that is important throughout, but becomes particularly important at senior is have backbone, disagree, and commit. right? And that is basically around how well do you, one, communicate your own ideas and stand up for things you believe, and also how well can you, when a decision goes against you, how well can you react to it, and in essence, disagree and commit. So let's do a question on that one. Does it sound good?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Can you describe a time when you took an unpopular stance in a meeting with peers and your leader? What was it, and why did you feel strongly about it?
I would say, I recall when I was at Bloomberg, during a meeting, we were discussing creating a new API. Basically, the API, for context, what we were doing, what I was doing at Bloomberg was I was in the data license department. And what that department would do is it would collate basically stocks, bonds, and commodities data into a file that might take, actually, due to the nature of the process, maybe a few hours, and then drop that file off onto an FTP server for the client to pick up. Some client like, I don't know, a bank or something like Goldman Sachs or whoever. Then we had a new system that we were considering creating, which basically held and recorded metadata that described these data sets, because maybe there are some stocks and bond commodities that correlate to Asia or just, I don't know, oil or energy or whatever. And customers want to be able to buy different packages that correspond to different like subsections of the economy. And so that metadata would help them to pick different packages on some sort of front end. There'd be a web app. It would go into that metadata, I don't know, API, and then actually select different subsets of the data. So for DL MetaDS, which was like the new system, we were considering, I guess, ComDB2 and Postgres. The team seemed to coalesce around ComDB2 because the company's somewhat old and generally they stick to older technologies. ComDB2 is a proprietary internal database that has support internally within Bloomberg, but it doesn't have a lot of support outside of the company. I felt like we should use Postgres because it would leverage knowledge that exists from outside the company, except some more senior engineers who've been working there for a while were a bit reticent to introduce Postgres into for that particular part of the project. I think me and another developer were pretty adamant about it. We basically argued that with the external support, that would make it a lot easier for new engineers. We just hired a bunch of new engineers. It would make it a lot easier for us to spin up on the project rather than having to basically connect ourselves. And it would prevent us from having to ask other senior engineers who had just been working at Bloomberg for information about how to work with ComDB2 when we ran into any issues. It would allow us to just rely on like Stack Overflow and Postgres documentation rather than the sparse ComDB2 documentation. And so eventually, after a couple meetings, they relented, and rather than using ComDB2 as the database for this new system, we did use Postgres. And there were some difficulties in, I guess, making it work with other parts of the system. That was a counterpoint that the other engineers had raised. But ultimately, I think it was the right decision. And it seemed like we had access to tools that Postgres offers us, like being able to do queries within JSON. Even like if JSON exists as a data type on a particular column, you can do a query within that JSON. That was useful. And I think we got a high return on that investment in using Postgres rather than ComDB2, this older internal technology. So
what was the final outcome?
The final outcome is that we did adopt Postgres for that particular DL MetaDS project. And it was part of a larger project, since the reason why Bloomberg had hired quite a few new engineers was to engage in a refactoring project anyway. We were already in the middle of refactoring code from C and C++ over to Python, just to make it easier to onboard new people and make it easier to debug the project, which I guess that's kind of a tangential thing. But ultimately, I think it was the right decision. But when it comes to profiling, whether or not Postgres is faster than ComDB2, I can't. I don't remember the profiling specifics, so that's something I'd have to. I don't know. I'd have to think about. Maybe I have some notes about it. I have to go back into my notes and read those.
Okay. Awesome. Overall, I would say like this is an answer to learn from. So great job. I have only fairly minor comments and minor things that could be moved around a bit. So let me talk through those really quick, and then we can like maybe George has something more substantive than me. So overall, the situation as described was well done. So it was fairly concise. You might consider trying to make it a little bit more concise. Like basically you want like 2-3 sentences, like maybe up to 30 seconds tops for the situation description. Like there are some details that I don't necessarily need to know in the situation, right, to understand the story. The big, or my only big comment that I would make is, have you ever heard of this notion in literary circles of the Chekhov's gun?
Yeah.
So
where
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's like if you mention like a weapon in the first scene, it's going to be used by the third or the first act. It's going to be used by the final act. It's like, oh, there's a gun over the fireplace, and so obviously one of the characters is going to use it later.
Exactly.
It's foreshadowing.
Exactly. So in your story, the Chekhov's gun that I heard is if we use ConDB2, then new engineers who are coming on board are going to have more trouble ramping up. And the project is going to take longer. So the reason I asked at the end for the outcome, even though you had provided an outcome, is I was waiting for that gun to fire.
Yeah.
Right? And
what I see. Yeah.
Right. What I want to hear at the end when we talk about the outcome is, as it turned out, because we used Postgres 2, we reduced the ramp time for new engineers coming onto the project by 30%. Or the project was delivered on schedule or ahead of schedule. Right, and was like fit really nicely into the larger project, that kind of thing, right? So in other words, the loaded gun of ConDB2 is harder to work with and it takes longer to get to results, has to go off by the end.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's see, that was the other thing, and then the actions were fine. One thing you may consider is you had mentioned the counterpoint that the other engineers made. That was a little bit out of order. So in other words, you mentioned that you had the discussion and you provided the reasoning behind like why you were arguing what you were arguing. Then you went on, after a couple of meetings, they relented and we wound up using Postgres. There were some difficulties making it work because of the counterpoint that they made earlier. And so it just puts things a little bit out of order. And the last thing is maybe very subtle and very subjective, which is you never want to make your hiring manager feel stupid or ignorant. So when you mention ConDB2 in the same sentence as Postgres, I go, oh, holy shit, is there some database I don't know about? Ooh, I'm gonna have to pretend that I know what you're talking about. I'm scared now, right? So, I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, right? But you get the basic idea, right? If you mention a technology that is proprietary, just mention it right away. It's a proprietary database. Then I don't have to feel nervous about not knowing something. And, not all hiring managers are going to react in this kind of a weird defensive stance, but some will. And the more you can prevent this kind of an interaction, the better your likelihood of success in an interview.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds good.
George, what do you have? I feel like I only have little things.
I mean, I agree with, I was nodding my head a lot when you were talking. I agree with everything you said. I'm not going to repeat it. So I think well said. And highlight the outcome more. Like I was waiting for you to say some more things, like not just I was right, here's some benefits. And actually the first thing you said after was there were some difficulties with integration. So like you made it sound like you were almost rethinking your decision, like the way we're telling the story, right? So that was kind of like a little problematic. Like I was like, oh, is he really going to go down the route of saying how he wasn't right? But then you highlighted the benefits more. And so I think you did well, and you said it was better ROI. If you could expand on that a little bit more, that'd be great, right? Like you talked about how it improves onboarding and reduces, having to look up documentation, talk to others. Can you compare it to another project that was similar that used the other database, and how much faster? If you can, awesome, great. Even if it's anecdotal, you can say, this came out in feedback that this was a really good approach, right? Like the small problems we overcame, but overall a net benefit. Like, did you make the other engineers' lives better? Like if you could pull out a quote from someone, right? Even if it's like a message or email or something they said in the hallway, something like that, just add some more evidence to your rightness of what you're saying.
Sure.
But overall, yeah, good delivery. You talk about pretty good example. A couple other things I would point out. Your resume, just like the other two resumes, doesn't tell me the impact that you had. No outcomes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stand out, just like the other two resumes. This is like very, very common, but as a hiring manager, this is pretty much the first thing I look at. I don't look at technologies you've used. I look at more about competence, and that's demonstrated by your outcomes and impacts that you've had on the business, people, technology. So there's nothing in your resume about that. Then finally, presentation-wise, your delivery was okay. I think it just comes with more practice of like answering questions. You get more polished, but you had some like pauses and ums in the beginning. Totally normal, right? But that's normal. You want to be above normal. So I think you be more polished, and you're probably not going to have the same setup when you do a real interview, but your background's a little cluttered. I would declutter or do a virtual background or something that's just a little cleaner. Don't make me guess what those board games are on top of yourself. Unless it's like really cool and interesting. Like I had a person who had a 3D printer in their background, and at first it was a little distracting. I was kind of like wondering what it is, and then I asked him about it, and he told me, and that was kind of a cool discussion. So usually just the clean background is better.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
All right. Thank you very much, James.
Sorry, one last really quick thing, James, that may be worth mentioning. At the very end of the response, you mentioned profiling, and that you don't have numbers. This is a good reason to have a story bank, right? And to have the story bank ready at your fingertips when you're answering questions. So if you're going to go after a story, you need to have those numbers, right? So I mean, this is a little different than a real interview, obviously. Like I'm assuming you wouldn't say at the real interview that like I don't have those numbers, but they're somewhere in my notes, right? Like you need to be prepared and you need to be able to quote them.
Okay.
But it's a minor point.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense to me. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much, James. Again, welcome to join to our next mock interviews. Please join. And I think you did great. Anyway.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, guys. I think we can process and do the last mock interview with another candidate. Before doing this, I'm gonna ask you to answer the quick poll. We just need to know where we can improve. Yeah, just take a few, like 10 seconds, and just answer these 4 questions. We would be very appreciated to improve our mock interview experience. While I am adding the last candidate. Candidate number 5. Are you with us? You muted, by the way.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm outdoors right now.
No worries.
No problem. Just let us know you You want to still doing this, or you want to do this next
Yeah.
time?
I can still do it.
Okay,
All right.
great.
All right.
Can you give me a name so that I don't have to refer to you as candidate number 5?
I'll go by John.
Sounds good, John. Thank you so much for volunteering, and thanks for being here. So
Thank you.
really briefly, what seniority level are you looking for, and what role?
I'm looking for more junior or mid-level.
Okay, and software engineer?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's do another leadership principle that is also important for juniors, and that is bias for action. Bias for action is around, there's typically this continuum between somebody who jumps in and starts acting as quickly as possible versus someone who gets into analysis paralysis and never really does anything. So questions around bias for action are designed to kind of try and get to that. So let me choose a question from that leadership principle, and we'll try that. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Okay, so tell me about a time when you had to gather information and respond immediately to a situation.
Before I start, can this answer be for something that's non-related to software engineering, or does it have?
No, it should be technical. It should be related
technical?
to something in the software engineering realm.
Okay, I mean, I have worked as a solutions engineer for Data Alliance Group, company that I work for right now, and pretty much what we do there is we sell leads to companies, like finance companies that reach out to possible investors or prospects. And what we do there is we send out SMS messages to potential clients from the leads that they purchase from us. And one thing that that rates as success is if it's like a 15 to 20% conversion rate on clients that we reach out to that are possibly interested in signing up. So one thing that I noticed is we were only getting about 5 to 10% on the first marketing campaign that we ran. And what they were utilizing is they were sending the same message over and over to these same prospects. So they weren't getting any different messages sent to them. And what I had suggested is to create an algorithm in which they would send out a different message based on the number of times they've sent out a message and if they've responded in the past. I brought that solution over to the software engineers as a solutions engineer to create a different template based on how many times they've reached out to the customers. And after doing so, we did increase it to about 15 to 18% in response rate, and also in landing page signups by doing that. I think when you start to make different messages being sent out, it doesn't look so robotic. Doesn't look like a bot is sending it out. It looks more personalized, and I think that's why it succeeded in that change.
That makes sense. So from a technical contribution perspective in this story, sort of what did you contribute other than the idea?
Well, again, I wasn't a software engineer. I could have written the algorithm to create a different a text message based on how many times it was sent. But it was mostly the solution that I contributed for them. And they were the ones that wrote out the code.
Got it. Okay. So quick feedback. Overall, like, as a story, this works, just maybe not in a software engineering interview.
Understood. Yeah. I've never had a full-time role as a software engineer, and most of my projects have been, I guess, on the side, freelance work, and but that was something that's closely resembles of what a software engineer would do. Is just I offered the solution instead of writing the code.
Yeah. So I do think that referencing freelance projects is actually perfectly fine. It's not just perfectly fine, it may be desirable. Because remember, like, there are 4 key attributes that a hiring manager looks for when they're talking to candidates. That is ownership, competence, collaboration, and attitude.
Okay.
Right? When you do freelance work, you are the owner. It's all on you. It's all ownership. So this gives you a terrific chance to talk about, like, the ownership that you've taken to move the problem forward. Right? So I think leveraging those is fine, but it does need to have like a technical component to it.
Okay.
At least from my perspective. I don't know, George, if you feel differently.
No, 100% agree.
Yeah, so I wouldn't use this story in the story that you told, I wouldn't use it in a software engineering interview. If you're interviewing for other roles, like PM role, for instance, absolutely. Absolutely, you can tell the story. Right? Just not in a SDE.
Got it. And had that story been that I did write the code, then it would be perfectly acceptable, right? Because then I was contributing to the engineering side. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And then you can kind of talk about what the challenges were with that and how it fit into their overall system, right? Because the thing is, even for behavioral questions, some hiring managers will take it to a technical point regardless, right? So in other words, it starts with a soft skills, behavioral, and then in the middle, they'll say, okay, let's draw up an architecture diagram of the thing you were working on. Because the other thing I want to know is that you're not BSing me, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know that you have a good understanding of the system you were working with. So, I will do this sometimes. I'll say, okay, so I understand what you were doing. Can you draw up a architecture of the solution?
Got it. Okay.
And I want to see, like, does the candidate understand the overall system?
Yes.
Right. So that's why you want a problem that has a technical component to it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for volunteering and for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I think we did today. I think we hit the record. We had how many? 4 candidates overall this Saturday.
And we managed to squeeze a presentation in too.
I know.
We're rocking it. We're exceeding expectations.
Totally. Yeah, thank you everyone for participating in today's mock interview session. Please join our program. Please join our next mock interviews. We're gonna do this every Saturday for the next month for sure. Yeah, hit us any questions if you have. Thank you all for giving the feedback. Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
And I'll see you next Saturday then. Bye-bye.